Today I'll be presenting Unit 21, which covers dish gardens, miniature fairy gardens, and terrariums. These are all examples of container gardens that combine horticulture with creativity. Though container gardens can be relatively small, they require many of the same principles used in larger landscapes, including plant selection, container choice, growing media, design, and care. Throughout this presentation, I'll explain what makes each of them unique and talk about how to create and care for them successfully. Before looking at each type individually, it's important to understand what container gardens are. A container garden is simply a planting system where plants are grown in a container instead of directly in the ground. The container provides everything the plant needs, including the growing media, water, nutrients, drainage, and space for root growth. Container gardens are important because they allow people to garden almost anywhere. They're ideal for patios, apartments, offices, classrooms, or other locations where traditional gardening isn't practical. The three main types we'll discuss today are dish gardens, miniature fairy gardens, and terrariums. While each has a different appearance and purpose, they all rely on selecting compatible plants and providing the proper growing environment. We'll begin with dish gardens. A dish garden is a shallow container planted with several compatible plants that share similar growing requirements. Instead of displaying a single plant, a dish garden combines multiple plants in one attractive arrangement. The goal is to create interest by combining different colors, textures, leaf shapes, and heights while making sure all of the plants have similar needs for light, water, and soil. Dish gardens can be displayed indoors or outdoors depending on the plants that are selected, and they're commonly used as decorative pieces in homes, offices, hotels, and public buildings. Choosing the right container is one of the most important decisions because it affects both the appearance and the health of the plants. Dish gardens are usually planted in shallow, wide containers. This gives enough room to arrange several plants without making the container too deep. Drainage is also extremely important. If the container has drainage holes, excess water can escape naturally. If it doesn't, a drainage layer should be added and watering needs to be done more carefully to avoid root rot. The container should be also large enough to allow room for future growth while keeping the overall arrangement balanced. Finally, the material and style of the container should complement the design. Ceramic, clay, wood, plastic, and decorative containers can all work well depending on the desired appearance. Plant selection plays a major role in whether a dish garden succeeds. The best plants are slow-growing species that remain proportional to the container. Since they're sharing the same growing space, it's important that they all have similar requirements for light, moisture, and humidity. A good arrangement also includes plants with different textures and heights to create visual interest. For example, one taller plant can act as the focal point, while smaller plants fill the remaining space. Some florists and gardeners refer to those as thrillers, fillers, and spillers. We'll talk about that in a bit. Some examples shown here include Photonia for color, Dracaena for height, English ivy as a trailing plant, Peperomia for compact foliage, and miniature ferns for texture. One mistake to avoid is combining plants that have very different water requirements, such as tropical plants and succulents. The growing medium is just as important as the plants themselves because it provides support, water, nutrients, and oxygen to the roots. A high-quality potting mix that drains well while still retaining moisture is recommended for most dish gardens. Depending on the plants being grown, different materials can be added to improve the growing medium. Peat moss and coconut coir help retain moisture, while perlite and pine bark improve drainage and increase airspace around the roots. Vermiculite also helps retain water and nutrients, and compost can be added in moderation to increase organic matter. The goal is to create a growing medium that keeps the roots healthy without becoming waterlogged. Once the plants and container have been selected, they need to be arranged in a way that's both attractive and functional. One of the easiest design methods to remember is called the thriller, filler, and spiller concept. The thriller is the tallest plant and serves as the focal point. The filler plants occupy the middle area and provide fullness throughout the arrangement. Finally, the spiller plants trail over the edges of the container, softening the overall appearance and creating a more natural look. In addition to following this design formula, plants should also be spaced properly so they have room to grow while maintaining a balanced composition. Once a dish garden has been planted, regular maintenance is what keeps it looking healthy and attractive. Most dish gardens perform best in bright, indirect light, although the exact lighting requirements depend on the plants that were selected. Watering should be done carefully because containers dry out differently than garden beds. The soil should be allowed to dry slightly between waterings, but it shouldn't become completely dry. Routine maintenance includes removing dead or damaged leaves, lightly fertilizing during the growing season, rotating the container occasionally so all sides receive even light, and pruning plants that begin to outgrow the arrangement. Many problems in dish gardens are actually caused by overwatering rather than underwatering. Too much moisture can lead to root rot and disease, while poor lighting can cause plants to become weak and stretched. And now miniature fairy gardens. They take the basic idea of a container garden and combine it with creativity and imagination. These gardens are designed to resemble tiny landscapes using miniature plants, pathways, houses, furniture, and decorative accessories. Although they have a whimsical appearance, they still follow the same horticultural principles as any other planting. Plant health always comes first. The accessories should complement the plants rather than overcrowding them. Scale is also important since all of the decoration should appear proportional to the size of the plants and container. Fairy gardens have become increasingly popular because they appeal to gardeners of all ages and encourage creativity while still teaching proper plant care. The container helps establish the overall theme of the fairy garden. Almost any container can be used as long as it provides enough room for the plants and has adequate drainage. Common choices include ceramic bowls, wooden boxes, old wheelbarrows, galvanized tubs, and decorative pots. When choosing a container, it's important to think about the finished landscape. There should be enough space for miniature pathways, houses, bridges, or other fun accessories without overcrowding the plants. The size of the container also determines how elaborate the design can become while still allowing the plants room to grow. Plant selection for a fairy garden is especially important because the goal is to create the illusion of a miniature landscape. As with dish gardens, it's important to choose plants that share similar requirements for light, moisture, and humidity. This allows the entire garden to thrive under the same growing conditions. Slow-growing plants with naturally small leaves work best because they stay in proportion to the decorations. Different textures and heights create the appearance of tiny trees, shrubs, and ground covers. For example, creeping plants can resemble lawns and vines, upright plants can represent trees, and moss can simulate the forest floor. The growing media used in a fairy garden is similar to that used in other container gardens. Good soil with other moisture-retaining media, and maybe some rocks and stones to create a cute canvas for the accessories. After planting, fairy gardens require regular but simple maintenance. Watering should be done whenever the soil begins to dry, dead leaves should be removed, and plants should be trimmed. Because the plants continue to grow, occasional pruning helps keep scale and balance. It's also a cool idea to occasionally use seasonal plants or decorations so the fairies can celebrate too. A bonus feature for a fairy garden is a miniature battery or solar-powered string of lights. The fairy garden here is a mystical little world when the sun goes down. Let's move on to our final type of container garden, the terrarium. A terrarium is a miniature garden grown inside a clear glass or plastic container. It can be either open or closed depending on the type of plants being grown. One of the most interesting features of a closed terrarium is its ability to recycle moisture. Some terrariums barely need any water at all. Water evaporates from the soil and plants, then condenses on the inside of the glass, and then drips back into the growing media. This creates a miniature water cycle that allows terrariums to thrive with very little watering once established. Terrariums are ideal for small tropical plants because they provide the warm, humid environment those plants naturally like. Terrariums actually have a very interesting history that dates back to the early 19th century. They were developed by an English physician and botanist named Nathaniel Bagshaw Ward. While studying insects, he was surprised to find that a fern had begun growing inside a sealed glass container unexpectedly. This observation led him to discover that plants could thrive inside enclosed glass environments. Ward later developed the Wardian case, which was used to transport plants safely around the world during long trips overseas. Before this invention, many valuable plants died from exposure to salty air or rough weather conditions. The Wardian case became one of the most important innovations in horticulture because it so greatly improved the survival of transported plants and eventually inspired the modern terrarium that we use today. Choosing the right container is essential because it creates the environment the plants will live in. Terrariums are usually made from clear glass so light can easily reach the plants while allowing the garden to be viewed from every angle. Closed containers are best for tropical plants that thrive in high humidity, while open containers are better suited for plants that prefer drier conditions or increased air circulation, like succulents or cactus. The opening should also be large enough to allow planting and future maintenance. Finally, the container should be clean and transparent so the plants remain the focal point of the display. Just like other container gardens, terrariums rely on the proper growing media to support healthy plant growth. A terrarium uses several layers that each serve a specific purpose. The bottom layer is made of gravel or small pebbles, which creates drainage by allowing excess water to collect below the soil. Above the gravel is a thin layer of activated charcoal. This helps absorb impurities and keeps the terrarium fresh by reducing odors and discouraging the growth of bacteria. A layer of sphagnum moss is then added to separate the charcoal from the potting mix. Finally, a sterile, well-drained potting mix provides support, moisture, nutrients, and airspace for the plant roots. Using the proper growing media helps create a healthy environment where plants can thrive for many years. It's also very cool to see stripy, different colors of the layers through the glass. Plant selection is especially important because plants will be sharing the same enclosed environment. The best terrarium plants are small, slow-growing tropical species that enjoy consistent moisture and high humidity. Choosing plants with similar environmental requirements makes caring for the terrarium much easier. A variety of leaf colors, shapes, and textures also creates visual interest. For example, Photonia adds colorful foliage. Peperomia provides compact greenery, miniature ferns contribute fine texture, baby tears create a dense ground cover, Selaginella adds a soft moss-like appearance, and live moss helps produce the natural forest floor that many people associate with terrariums. By combining compatible plants, the finished terrarium becomes both attractive and easy to maintain. Once the container and plants have been selected, the terrarium can be assembled. The first step is adding the drainage layer of gravel, followed by activated charcoal and sphagnum moss. After that, the potting mix is added, creating the rooting zone for the plants. When planting, it's usually easiest to arrange the largest plants first and then work toward the smallest plants in ground covers. This allows the overall design to develop naturally while leaving enough room for each plant to grow. After planting, decorative elements such as rocks, bark, or moss can be added to enhance the appearance. Finally, the inside of the glass should be cleaned so the plants are clearly visible and the terrarium is ready for display. One of the reasons terrariums are so popular is because they're relatively low maintenance once they've become established. They should be placed in bright, indirect light because direct sunlight can quickly overheat the enclosed container and damage the plants. Watering should be done very sparingly. In a closed terrarium, moisture is continuously recycled through the evaporation and condensation, so additional watering is needed only occasionally. Regular maintenance includes removing dead leaves, pruning plants to maintain their size, and keeping the glass clean so light can reach the plants. It's also important to observe condensation. A light layer of condensation is normal, but heavy condensation usually means there's too much moisture. Opening the lid briefly allows excess humidity to escape and helps restore the proper balance. Although dish gardens, fairy gardens, and terrariums are attractive decorative displays, they also have many practical uses within horticulture. They're commonly used in homes, offices, hotels, restaurants, and public buildings to improve interior spaces with living plants. Garden centers and florists frequently sell them as gifts and decorative arrangements because they're attractive and relatively easy to maintain. They're also valuable education tools. Students learn about plant identification, design principles, growing media, and proper plant care while creating these gardens. Finally, these gardens are used in therapeutic horticulture programs because caring for plants has been shown to reduce stress, encourage creativity, and increase appreciation for the natural world. So, to summarize, all three types of container gardens rely on the same basic horticultural principles. Successful gardens begin with choosing the proper container, selecting compatible plants, and using an appropriate growing medium. Good design is equally important. Combining different colors, textures, heights, and forms creates visually appealing arrangements while maintaining plant health. Regular maintenance, including proper watering, pruning, and monitoring environmental conditions, helps these gardens remain healthy over time. Although they're small in size, dish gardens, fairy gardens, and terrariums demonstrate how science, creativity, and design come together to create beautiful living landscapes.